You're watching TVC Breakfast. All is now set for the National Assembly to receive the 16.39 trillion 2022 Appropriation Bill. Now, in a couple of hours from now, President Muhammadu Buhari will go before a joint session of the National Assembly to present the budget estimates for the 2022 fiscal year. Now, the President, in a letter to the National Assembly, sought to make some changes in the recently passed medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper, the parameters on which the 2022 budget will be framed. The President has said that the changes which he is asking the National Assembly to approve in the medium-term expenditure framework is in line with the newly enacted Petroleum Industry Act. So that's what we'll be talking about in the next couple of minutes. And joining me now to discuss this is Mukhtar Mohammed, CEO of Finance with Mukhtar. It's good to have you join me this morning.
Always a pleasure.
Great. And good to have you home from your holiday in the United States.
Thank you.
All right, now let's talk about this. The point there is 16.3 trillion naira. We heard the Minister of Finance in her brief, in the media brief recently, I think about a few days ago, also talking about the fact that part of that deficit will be financed by borrowings. Now, I wonder what optimism you have going into when you have an outlook of the 2022 budget as it is being presented.
I think one thing we're happy about now is that the budget is always presented in October.
On time.
Good, on
good
time. Good time, not really so much of, but at least good time compared to December, November, ending December, and I expect it to go into law by January 1st. So we're happy about that. A good thing about this president, but let's highlight some of the good things that are going to come out from this budget. I've seen oil price spike at $57 per barrel. For me, that's very interesting. That is very nice. For the first time, we are not over expectation in that quarter, even if oil price is selling for $81 per barrel. So that gives us a lot of room, and they're tagging our at 1.8 million per barrel a day, which is compared to 2.5 billion barrels
per day
the other time. So we're making things to be making a little bit of progress in terms of, its budget projection. So they could be TKO left, and then the medium-term expenditure. They did something that have never been done before. We always see that when you take this thing to the National Assembly, they jack it up. But for the first time, the National Assembly, they're reducing it by 60 billion, bringing down our budget deficits by the time the president. So those are the good things in the budget presenting. Now, the challenge of the budget is, like you said, is expenditure, which is one big challenge that the government have been grappling with, especially borrowing. If you look at, and thank God the Minister of Finance is always saying it, that if you look at our GDP to borrowing, it's fantastic, it's okay. But when you look at our revenue to borrowing, then we have a big challenge. And then that's why people have been clamoring that, okay, instead of you doing the borrowing in terms of borrowing work, we can't do it. He's talking about bridges, he's talking about roads, he's talking about good infrastructure. Can we do the security link type of infrastructure that we have in other developed countries? Using those as a security, getting what we call a public-private partnership, so that you don't have to borrow, so that project will be able to generate its own fund and fund itself, rather than getting Nigeria more into debt. For me, that is the greatest challenge. And then the exchange rate at 410, I think again that's another challenge, because let's say the CBN is doing already, saying that we are moving towards unified exchange rate, which is good. But again, we are not yet there yet, and then putting it at 410, I think it's been over ambitious.
Now, you mentioned exchange rate. Let's talk about that a bit before we come back to the budget proper. Even the IMF has advised at one point or the other that Nigeria should try to unify all the multiple exchange rates that are available, and all of that. But why is it so challenging to have a unified exchange rate for the country? Because
people want to continue doing things the way they used to do things. You travel out, Mark, and when you go to a country, when you want to look at the exchange rate of a country, when you say, okay, you want to do an exchange rate, you go straight to this official website of the CBN.
The figures are there.
The figures are there. In our case, you have to go to the roadside to determine. Then we have to have a private company determining the exchange rate. But when you call, people want to exchange money and they call, they rather go to that site to look at what the exchange rate is doing instead of the government site that's supposed to give us what the exchange rate is. So people have been enjoying those largest. You see, when you are doing business the way you used to do business and they want to be a sudden change, there will be a fight back. So unified exchange rate is not rocket science, but because a lot of people benefit in the type of exchange rate we have been operating. Remember, Mark, I've told you this some years ago when we on this program that I do not see why we cannot have the bank doing what the Bureau de Change were doing, like it's done in every developed nation at that time. And at that time, if we were able to, you see, the challenge is that when we had the opportunity to copy it, when we have the resources to meet the demand and we have the resources to meet the supply, we didn't do it. We're only doing it because we have been pushed to the wall. We don't have the resources to meet the demand, neither are we having the supply like we used to have it. So it's going to be a big challenge for them. That's why I said they may achieve the unified exchange rate, but it's going to be a very Herculean task. It's going to take a lot.
But what would it take to achieve a unified exchange rate across the country?
Look, it has to make sure you're able to meet demands. Demand is the challenge.
For Forex?
For Forex is the challenge. Now, you've created a window for those that are traveling, for school fees, for medicals, but you've not created a seamless window for the SMEs. Now, SMEs, when I mean SMEs are those that don't need more than maybe $3,000, $5,000, and they need it as soon as they can get it because of the speed in which they want to get their product from whichever part of the world back to Nigeria. So they don't have that luxury to get the Form F, to fill it and submit it to you, and then you verify it. At that time, the person they are doing business with is already looking for some other people. So they've not created that window for them. So that is why the parallel market was a more easy access to them, because it was seamless for them to get their. So it's going to be a huge challenge. So why we've not gotten that unified exchange rate is because the basic thing is that we cannot meet the demands, especially of the SMEs that are the ones that were patronizing the parallel market through the Bureau de Change. Unless we create a window for them that will be seamless, we'll continue to have this exchange rate fluctuation at 577 in the flyer market compared to the official market. It's not something we cannot achieve, but like I said, we have shortage in terms of supply.
In supply. Okay, back to the budget now. The concern, how would you assess the performance of the 2021 budget so far?
It's very hard to assess the 2021 budget performance because you know we're coming in from the pandemic. There were a lot of technicality issues in terms of embarking on those projects, especially when the country was almost at a lockdown at a point. So it's very difficult. So they could say, look, we've been able to perform, even if they give us a 30 to 40 or 50% performance. People will say they've really done well. But in reality, performance of the budget is looked in terms of meeting statutory allocation. That's what we've been doing since when we say we are performing budget. But when you look at in terms of projects, in terms of project, we've not been able to meet most of those deadlines that we set, either due to shortage in terms of funds are not available because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so in terms of meeting legitimate demands of project, we've not been able to meet it. But in terms of meeting recurrent expenditure, which sometimes our lawmaker used to say the budget has performed well, then we could say we've done that, because recurrent expenditure just have everything to do with salary, allowances. And like I always say, the people that benefit more from salary and allowances are the political class. And if you watch the body language of the Minister of Finance, he's saying that the budget deficit keeps going up because in terms of salary and allowances that they have to pay.
All right, now looking at, we're still expecting to see, the budget estimate for 2022, the breakdown on all of that, is, of course, we'll certainly look at that as we get along and as the presentation is made and so on. But if we're still trying to recover from the pandemic, we've recovered 2021, but then there are still areas to recover properly and all of that. What areas do you think that the budget should focus on as a way of getting Nigeria back on track?
Definitely it's in the area of job creation. I mean, we need to begin to create jobs, and we can only create jobs when we implement some of the projects that the ministers are saying. That's why we're saying if you have a public-private partnership, that will help in terms of creating jobs and create a snowball effect. Presently, and then the budget should address not the up to down level. Let's see the budget come from the bottom to up, then it will be able to touch a lot of Nigerians. We should do more interventions in terms of interventions in the economy, direct interventions. What that means, we see how we can get SMEs working, we see how we can create that enabling environment, we see how we can widen our tax bracket without killing the smaller business that are trying to. So the challenge is that let's see how we're going to widen our revenue base also. But in the long run, we need to begin to create jobs, especially for the youths. The jobs need to start coming up because we are staying on a time bomb. This budget should be addressing meeting up with job creation in the area whereby we've had challenges, especially with the youth. Most of them lost their job during the pandemic. So how has the direct intervention helped? How much can the direct intervention help in creating those jobs? Those are what I want to see in this current budget, because if you talk, then insecurity is a major challenge, which I think we want to see how they are going to respond. We are beginning to get those equipment that we said we were waiting for from the United States. Now it's now how you boost the morale of the security force to begin to go after these bandits and terrorists that have made Nigeria more or less like a failed state. Some states like a failed state.
What will be the strategic role of the? We've often talked about the issue of the private sector being, partnered with, so they can participate in the. What role can they play to change or to become a game changer when it comes to revamping the economy and taking us back in there? Of course, a lot of people have said, we've often said the government has no business in business, and all of that, but there are still areas where people see it as government should be the one doing some certain things and not handing certain areas to either private hands or even foreigners.
Yeah, you see, that works if you have all your parameters right. You have the funds, you have the economy moving, then you more or less bring the private sector in some other sectors to help you try to boost those sectors, especially sectors that as a government, you've not been able to have the technicality or the manpower or the resources to boost it. But as it stands now, Nigeria is more or less in handicap. The government needs the private sector more than the private sector needs them. Because when you're talking about infrastructure, the president have said it when he went to the United Nations, when he went to the United States, he said, we need over $2 trillion to begin to meet up infrastructure in this country. The government as a whole cannot do that. So what you need to do, you need to do what has been done in developed economies. In developing economy that in turn help them to become a developed economy. When you look at the Singapore parameter, that was how they went. You begin to build infrastructure by and by using those infrastructure as a security to gain the private sector. We see that work. We're seeing that about to work. We're seeing that work with their Apapa straight to Apapa to Bega Road. We're seeing how Dangote is doing that also. We're seeing some sectors, global MTN is saying they want to handle something in the east. So we need to begin to get most of these multinationals and say, come, we'll give you a tax bracket. If you do this, do this. So those are the ways you can grow an economy, especially in a situation whereby the government does not have the resources. Because what we begin to see is that government embark upon projects that they will not be able to complete, and it becomes like a white elephant project, which is supposed to help. So the private sector is there to help the government. But then the government need to come up with the right policy to attract the private sector to take up some of these infrastructural development. And those right policy for a private sector, when you're building the private sector, the policy that they see that they really want to come in there, it's when you just give them that tax bracket for the next 2 to 3 years. You say, look, if you do this, you do this for the next 2 to 3 years, you are going to have tax bracket on this and this based on your profit after tax, so holding tax, so all those things will now, because now what we see practice in Nigeria, we just look at tax as an avenue to create revenue. We keep talking about widening the tax bracket, widening the tax. We are not looking at using tax as an avenue to attract growth in our economy. That is the way taxation has gone, not just in terms of revenue, but in terms of growing the economy. Because when you grow in the economy, you are bringing more people into the tax bracket, because more people will be having the job, so they will be able to pay. The challenges we have is that government is looking for the easier way out. The easier way out is to widen the tax bracket, increase the tax bracket, harass businesses that you think they have the money. But the best way to attract something is by giving them tax bracket, by creating the environment to bring in those companies to grow the economy. Then you have more Nigerians are able to pay tax because they will be able to earn more.
Now, let's talk about the role of states, because often when we talk about budgets, it looks like the federal government, all attention goes to the federal government, and then the states are left, to do their thing at their own levels and so on. Now, and when it comes to implementation of budgets from the federal government and states and all of that, it seems everyone is just doing his own thing and at cross purposes.
But when you look at
how can the federal government try to align with states in such a way that if roads are going to be constructed, there is a systematic approach to things in such a way that everybody feels the impact of what is being done?
That's where true federalism comes. So when you talk about federalism, then the state has to do what they have to do, the federal government has to do. That's why you have some roads that they say they are federal roads, some roads that say they are state roads. If you look at budget implementations in the states, you realize that some of them are able to pass the budget on time, but in terms of implementation, outside of Lagos states, how many states can boast of having budget implementation of up to 70 to 80%? It's very rare, but in terms of passing of those budgets, easily pass those budgets. Then when you go to those states, you look at projects that have been embarked upon by those in those budget. They are not, nothing is done. So the challenge then is not on the us of the government or the federal government to begin to fight for the state government. It's for the people. So, but the challenge we have, we've been so militarized that we think all the power and everything belongs to the federal level, because that's what has been intolerable in Nigeria for a very long time. So everybody's eyes is on the federal government. The state government road is bad. People complain of the federal government, and you know that it's not a federal road. You just imagine you pay your house, your land use charges, you paid everything, and yet the road that is leading to your own house, it's not that, and yet you keep paying your land use charges. Nobody is looking at the local government. Nobody have said, okay, what is the budget of the local government chairman? Does the local government chairman not supposed to present a budget like a town hall meeting to the people? And
they do at their levels.
They do at their level, but it's done politically. It's done to you. You bring in the people that nobody is going to question. You don't even know the project that they're about to empower. Even when some resident intends to bank upon project, the local government tend to want to sabotage the project because all our attention is on the federal government. So we need to begin to look, as we're looking at the economy in the bottom-up approach, we as a people, we as a nation, the people of the nation, should begin to look at government from the bottom to the up approach.
Okay, well, bottom-up approach, that's what everyone, so there's some sense of inclusiveness in there.
Definitely.
All right, Mukhtar Mohammed, thank you so much for coming on the program.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Great.